The rain fell like bullets from the dark sky, each drop hitting the muddy ground with force. Sarah Chen sat against the cold concrete wall of the abandoned building, her military uniform soaked through. Her platoon had left her behind 3 hours ago. They said she was slowing them down with her injured leg. They said the mission was more important than one soldier. She pressed her hand against the bullet wound in her thigh, feeling the warm blood seep through her fingers. The pain was getting worse, but she refused to cry. She had been through worse things in her life. Growing up on the streets of Chicago had taught her that crying never solved anything. The sound of heavy boots splashing through puddles made her look up. Through the rain, she saw a tall figure walking toward her. The man wore the uniform of a high-ranking military officer. Even in the darkness, she could see the stars on his shoulders that marked him as a general. General Marcus Rodriguez had been searching for stragglers from the failed mission for the past hour. His men had told him that all soldiers were accounted for, but something felt wrong. He had learned to trust his instincts during his 25 years of military service. Those instincts had kept him alive through 4 wars and countless dangerous missions. When he saw the young soldier sitting alone in the rain, his heart sank. No one should be left behind, especially not someone who was clearly wounded. As he got closer, he could see that it was a female soldier, probably in her early 20s. Her dark hair was plastered to her head, and her face was pale from blood loss. "Soldier," he called out as he approached. "What's your name and unit?" Sarah looked up at him with defiant eyes. "Private Sarah Chen, 3rd Infantry Division, sir." Her voice was steady despite the pain she was feeling. "Why are you here alone, Private Chen?" The general's voice was stern but not unkind. "My unit left me behind, sir. They said I was slowing them down because of my injury." Sarah's voice cracked slightly, but she maintained eye contact with the general. General Rodriguez felt anger rise in his chest. Leaving a wounded soldier behind was against everything he believed in. It went against the military code and basic human decency. "Who was your commanding officer?" "Lieutenant Morrison, sir." Sarah shifted slightly, wincing as the movement sent fresh pain through her leg. The general knelt down beside her, ignoring the muddy water that soaked through his uniform pants. "Let me see that wound, soldier." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then moved her hand away from her thigh. The bullet had gone straight through, but the bleeding hadn't stopped completely. General Rodriguez had seen enough battlefield injuries to know that she needed medical attention soon. "We need to get you to a medic," he said, reaching into his kit for bandages. "This looks serious." As he began to wrap her wound, the sleeve of Sarah's uniform rode up slightly. In the dim light, General Rodriguez caught sight of something on her arm that made him freeze completely. There, just above her wrist, was a small tattoo of a phoenix rising from flames. But this wasn't just any phoenix tattoo. This was identical to one he had seen before, many years ago. His hand stopped moving, and he stared at the tattoo in disbelief. The design was exactly the same as the one he had seen on a woman named Maria Chen 23 years ago. Maria had been a translator working with American forces during a mission in Southeast Asia. She had been brave, intelligent, and incredibly kind. She had also been the love of his life. "Where did you get this tattoo?" he asked quietly, his finger pointing to the phoenix on her arm. Sarah looked confused by the sudden change in his tone. "It was my mother's design, sir. She drew it for me before she died. She said it represented starting over, no matter how many times life knocked you down." General Rodriguez felt his heart skip a beat. "What was your mother's name?" "Maria Chen, sir. She died when I was 7 years old." Sarah's voice became softer when she spoke about her mother. "She used to tell me stories about her work helping American soldiers overseas. She said she met my father during one of those missions, but he never knew about me." The general's mind raced as he processed this information. Maria Chen had disappeared suddenly from their base 24 years ago. He had searched for her everywhere, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. He never knew why she left, and he never got the chance to tell her how he felt about her. Now, sitting in the rain with her daughter, he understood. Maria must have been pregnant when she left. She had been carrying his child, and she had chosen to disappear rather than complicate his military career. He remembered how dedicated she was to helping people, how she always put others before herself. It would have been just like her to sacrifice her own happiness for his future. "Sir, are you okay?" Sarah's voice brought him back to the present. She was looking at him with concern, despite her own pain and exhaustion. "I'm fine, soldier," he said, finishing the bandage on her leg. But inside, His emotions were in chaos. This young woman was his daughter. The daughter he never knew existed. She had his eyes and Maria's determination. She had joined the military just like him, and she had the same courage that her mother had shown all those years ago. "Can you walk?" he asked, helping her to stand. Sarah tested her weight on the injured leg. It hurt, but she could manage. "Yes, sir. I can walk." "Good. We're going back to base camp." General Rodriguez put her arm over his shoulder to support her weight. "And I want to hear more about your mother on the way." As they walked through the rain together, Sarah told him everything she could remember about Maria. She talked about how her mother had worked multiple jobs to support them, how she had taught Sarah to be strong and independent, and how she had died in a car accident when Sarah was still young. She always talked about a man she met during her work with the military, Sarah said as they made their way across the muddy terrain. "She never told me his name, but she said he was the kind of man who would always do the right thing no matter how difficult it was." General Rodriguez listened to every word, his heart heavy with grief for the woman he had lost and amazement at the daughter he had found. Maria had been right about one thing. He had always tried to do the right thing, and right now, the right thing was to make sure this brave young woman got the medical care she needed and the recognition she deserved. "Your mother sounds like she was an amazing woman," he said softly. "She was, sir. She's the reason I joined the military. She always said that helping others was the most important thing a person could do." Sarah paused, then added, "I think she would have been proud to see me serving my country. I'm sure she would be very proud of you, Private Chen." The general's voice was thick with emotion that he tried to keep hidden. "You're a credit to her memory and to the uniform you wear." When they finally reached the base camp, General Rodriguez personally made sure that Sarah received immediate medical attention. The medics confirmed that her wound was serious but not life-threatening. With proper treatment, she would make a full recovery. While the doctors worked on Sarah, General Rodriguez went to find Lieutenant Morrison. He had some serious questions about why a wounded soldier had been left behind in enemy territory. When he found the lieutenant, the younger officer was laughing with his men about their successful mission. "Lieutenant Morrison," the general's voice cut through their conversation like a blade. "I need to speak with you immediately." The lieutenant's face went pale when he saw the general's expression. "Yes, sir. What can I do for you?" "You can explain to me why I found Private Chen wounded and alone in the rain, 3 miles from your extraction point." The general's voice was deadly calm, which was somehow more frightening than if he had been shouting. "Sir, she was slowing us down. The mission was time-sensitive, and we couldn't risk the entire unit for one soldier." Lieutenant Morrison tried to stand straighter, but his voice shook slightly. "The mission was to gather intelligence and return all personnel safely to base," General Rodriguez said. "You failed half of your mission objective, Lieutenant. A wounded soldier is never left behind. Never." "But sir," she said she could make it on her own. She insisted that we continue with the mission. The lieutenant was grasping for any excuse that might save his career. "A wounded soldier doesn't get to make that decision, Lieutenant. That's what leadership is for." The general stepped closer, his voice growing colder. "You will report to my office first thing in the morning for a full review of your conduct. And you will personally visit Private Chen to explain your actions to her." Lieutenant Morrison knew his career was probably over. Abandoning a wounded soldier was one of the most serious violations of military code. "Yes, sir. I understand." Later that evening, General Rodriguez sat beside Sarah's hospital bed. She was awake but groggy from the pain medication the doctors had given her. The fluorescent lights made her pale skin look even more fragile, but her eyes still held that fierce determination he had seen in the rain. "How are you feeling, Private?" he asked gently. "Better, sir. The doctors say I'll be able to return to duty in a few weeks." Sarah tried to sit up straighter, but the general motioned for her to stay comfortable. "There's no rush. Take all the time you need to heal properly." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been thinking about what you told me about your mother, about the man she met during her military service." Sarah nodded. "She never told me much about him, just that he was a good man who cared about doing the right thing." General Rodriguez took a deep breath. He had been wrestling with whether to tell her the truth. Part of him wanted to reveal everything right away, but another part worried about how she would react. She had been through enough trauma for one day. "Private Chen, I want you to know that what happened to you today will never happen again. Not while I'm in command." His voice was firm and reassuring. "No soldier under my command will ever be abandoned." "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me." Sarah's eyes began to close as the medication took effect. Get some rest, soldier. We'll talk more tomorrow. General Rodriguez stood to leave, but Sarah's voice stopped him. Sir, can I ask you something? Her words were slightly slurred from the drugs, but her question was clear. Of course. Do you think my mother would be proud of what I'm doing? Serving in the military like this? There was vulnerability in her voice that hadn't been there before. General Rodriguez looked at this brave young woman who was his daughter, and his heart filled with pride and love. Private Chen, I know for certain that your mother would be incredibly proud of you. You have her courage, her compassion, and her strength. She raised an exceptional daughter. Sarah smiled sleepily. Thank you, sir. That's exactly what I needed to hear. As General Rodriguez left the medical tent, his mind was filled with plans. He needed to figure out the best way to tell Sarah who he really was. He needed to learn more about her life and what had happened to Maria. Most importantly, he needed to find a way to be the father that Sarah deserved. Even if she was already grown up, the rain had finally stopped, and stars were beginning to appear in the clear night sky. For the first time in 23 years, Marcus Rodriguez felt like his life had real purpose again. He had found his daughter, and he was determined to make up for all the lost time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, and life-changing decisions. But tonight, he was simply grateful that fate had brought him to that abandoned building in the rain. If he had arrived 5 minutes later, if he had chosen a different search route, if Sarah's unit had extracted her properly, any of those things could have meant that he never would have found her. Looking up at the stars, he thought about Maria and wondered if somehow, somewhere, she had guided him to their daughter. The phoenix tattoo on Sarah's arm represented rising from the ashes, starting over no matter how many times life knocked you down. Maybe this was their chance to rise from the ashes of the past and build something new together. General Rodriguez walked back to his quarters, already planning how he would spend the rest of his life making sure that Sarah Chen knew she was loved, valued, and would never be left behind again. 3 days passed before Sarah was strong enough to walk without help. During those 3 days, General Rodriguez visited her every morning and evening. He told himself it was just to check on a wounded soldier, but deep down he knew the truth. He was trying to learn everything he could about the daughter he had never known existed. Sarah found the general's attention both puzzling and comforting. Most high-ranking officers barely noticed enlisted soldiers like her, but General Rodriguez seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences. He asked her about her childhood, her training, her hopes for the future. She had never had anyone in authority take such personal interest in her welfare. My mother used to say that everything happens for a reason, Sarah told him during one of his visits. She was sitting up in bed, her injured legs stretched out in front of her. Maybe I was supposed to get hurt so that someone like you could find me and remind me what real leadership looks like. General Rodriguez felt his chest tighten with emotion. What do you mean by that, Private? Well, sir, you came back for me when no one else did. You didn't have to do that. You could have assumed that my unit had everyone accounted for and moved on with your mission. Sarah's eyes were bright with respect and gratitude. But you trusted your instincts and came looking anyway. My mother always said that the best people are the ones who do the right thing even when nobody is watching. The general had to look away for a moment to compose himself. Maria's influence on their daughter was obvious in everything Sarah said and did. The young woman had inherited her mother's wisdom along with her courage. Your mother sounds like she was very wise, he said quietly. She was. She had this way of seeing the good in everyone, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. Sarah paused, then added, she used to tell me that my father was like that too. She said he was the kind of man who would move heaven and earth to help someone in need. General Rodriguez realized this was his opening. Sarah, can I ask you something personal? Of course, sir. Did your mother ever tell you anything specific about your father? Anything that might help you find him someday? The question felt dangerous, but he needed to know how much Maria had told her. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She told me his name was Marcus. She said he was a soldier, a leader who cared more about his men than himself. She said he had kind eyes but a strong heart. She looked directly at the general. She also said that he never knew about me, and that it was better that way. The general's hands gripped the sides of his chair. Why did she think it was better that way? She said his career was too important to be complicated by a family he never asked for. She said he had bigger things to do than worry about a woman and a baby. Sarah's voice became softer, but I always wondered what it would be like to meet him. Just once. General Rodriguez felt like his heart was breaking and healing at the same time. Maria had sacrificed everything to protect his career, never realizing that nothing was more important to him than family. If he had known about Sarah, he would have left the military in a heartbeat to be with them. "I think your father would want to know about you," he said carefully. "Any man would be proud to have a daughter like you." "Maybe. But it's probably too late now anyway. It's been 24 years, sir. He might have a whole different family by now." Sarah shrugged. But the general could see the sadness in her eyes. "Sometimes it's never too late for the things that really matter," he said. "Sometimes people get second chances they never expected." That evening, General Rodriguez sat in his office staring at an old photograph he kept locked in his desk drawer. It was a picture of him and Maria taken at a base celebration 24 years ago. She was laughing at something he had said, her dark eyes sparkling with joy. He had carried this picture through every deployment, every mission, every difficult moment of his career. Now he understood why she had left so suddenly. The timeline matched perfectly with Sarah's birth. Maria must have discovered she was pregnant and decided to disappear rather than complicate his life. She had probably thought she was doing the noble thing, the selfless thing. It was exactly the kind of sacrifice she would make for someone she loved. The question now was how to tell Sarah the truth. She deserved to know that her father hadn't abandoned her, that he had never even known she existed. But he was also terrified of how she might react. What if she was angry that he hadn't tried harder to find Maria? What if she felt like he was trying to replace the life she had already built for herself? A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. Lieutenant Morrison entered, his uniform perfectly pressed but his face pale with anxiety. "Sir, you asked me to report to you about the incident with Private Chen." "Yes, Lieutenant. Sit down." General Rodriguez put the photograph back in his drawer and focused on the young officer in front of him. "I've been reviewing the mission reports, and I have some serious concerns about your decision-making. Sir, I was following protocol for time-sensitive operations. The mission parameters also clearly stated that all personnel were to be extracted safely." The general interrupted. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what do you think would have happened to Private Chen if I hadn't found her?" Lieutenant Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I assumed she would be able to make her way back to base on her own, sir. With a bullet wound in her leg? In enemy territory? During a rainstorm?" The general's voice was dangerously quiet. "Lieutenant, that young woman could have died because of your decision. She could have bled out alone in that abandoned building. But she didn't, sir. You found her and—" "I found her by accident, Lieutenant. Pure chance. If I had chosen a different search route, if I had arrived 10 minutes later, Private Chen might be dead right now." General Rodriguez stood up and walked to the window. "That's not acceptable. That's not leadership. That's cowardice." Lieutenant Morrison's face flushed red. "Sir, with respect, I was thinking about the greater good. The intelligence we gathered will save hundreds of lives. And what about Private Chen's life? Does that not matter?" The general turned back to face him. "Let me tell you something about leadership, Lieutenant. Real leaders don't sacrifice their people for the mission. They find a way to accomplish the mission and bring everyone home. That's what separates good officers from great ones." The lieutenant remained silent, knowing that anything he said would only make things worse. "I'm recommending you for transfer to a different unit," General Rodriguez continued. "You need more training in battlefield ethics and decision-making before you're ready to lead soldiers again. And you will personally apologize to Private Chen before you leave this base." "Yes, sir. I understand." Lieutenant Morrison stood to leave, then paused. "Sir, can I ask why you care so much about this particular soldier? I mean, beyond the obvious issues with my conduct." General Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "Because every soldier under my command matters, Lieutenant. Because Private Chen represents everything that's good about our military: courage, loyalty, determination, and because sometimes the people we're supposed to protect end up teaching us what real strength looks like." After Lieutenant Morrison left, General Rodriguez walked to the medical tent to check on Sarah. He found her sitting outside on a bench, looking up at the stars. Her leg was still bandaged, but she was moving more easily now. "Mind if I join you, Private?" he asked. "Not at all, sir." She scooted over to make room for him on the bench. "I was just thinking about my mother. She used to say that the stars were like tiny lights, showing us the way home. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." General Rodriguez sat down beside her, careful to maintain appropriate distance. "You must miss her very much." "Every day, sir. But I try to live in a way that would make her proud." Sarah pointed to a particularly bright star. See that one? That was her favorite. She said it was the North Star, the one that never moves. She said that no matter how lost you get in life, you can always find your way, if you look for the things that stay constant. General Rodriguez followed her gaze to the star. What are the constants in your life, Sarah? My commitment to serving others, my belief in doing what's right, my hope that somewhere out there I have family who cares about me. She turned to look at him. What about you, sir? What are your constants? The general thought about his answer carefully. My duty to protect the people under my command. My belief that everyone deserves a second chance. My hope that the mistakes I've made in the past can somehow be made right. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Sarah spoke again. Sir, can I tell you something strange? Of course. Being around you reminds me of something my mother used to say about my father. She said that being near him made her feel safe, like nothing bad could happen as long as he was there. Sarah looked embarrassed. I know it's probably just because you're a general and you represent authority and protection. But what? But I feel that same way around you. Like you're someone who would never let anything bad happen to me if you could help it. She shrugged. It's silly. I know. General Rodriguez felt tears threatening to form in his eyes. It's not silly at all, Sarah. And you're right. I would never let anything bad happen to you if I could prevent it. Why, sir? I mean, I'm grateful. But I don't understand why you care so much about one wounded private. This was it. This was the moment he had been both hoping for and dreading. General Rodriguez took a deep breath and made his decision. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you. Something important about your mother and about the man she met during her military service. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking slightly. Sir, 24 years ago, I was a young captain stationed at a base in Southeast Asia. There was a translator there, a brilliant and beautiful woman who helped us communicate with local contacts. Her name was Maria Chen. He paused, watching Sarah's face carefully. I fell in love with her. Sarah's eyes widened with understanding. One night, she disappeared without explanation. I searched for her everywhere, but it was like she had vanished from the earth. I never knew why she left. General Rodriguez turned to face her fully, until 3 days ago, when I saw a phoenix tattoo on a young woman's arm and heard her talk about a mother named Maria Chen. Sarah stared at him in shock. You're my father? Yes, Sarah. I'm your father, and I want you to know that if I had known about you, if Maria had told me she was pregnant, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your life. His voice cracked with emotion. I would have given up my career, my military future, everything, to be the father you deserved. Tears began streaming down Sarah's face. She never told you? You never knew? I never knew. But I understand why she didn't tell me. She was protecting my career, sacrificing her own happiness so that I could continue serving. General Rodriguez reached out tentatively and took her hand. She was wrong about one thing, though. You and she would never have been a complication. You would have been the best thing that ever happened to me. Sarah threw her arms around him, and for the first time in 23 years, Marcus Rodriguez held his daughter. They cried together under the stars, mourning the lost years and celebrating the miracle of finding each other. I can't believe it, Sarah whispered against his shoulder. All this time, I dreamed about meeting you, and you were here all along. I'm here now, he said firmly, and I'm never going anywhere again. We have a lot of lost time to make up for. They talked until sunrise, sharing stories about their lives, about Maria, about all the moments they had missed together. General Rodriguez told her about his military career, his regrets about never finding Maria, his dreams of having a family someday. Sarah told him about growing up poor but proud, about joining the military to honor her mother's memory, about all the times she had wondered what it would be like to have a father. As the sun rose over the military base, both father and daughter knew that their lives had changed forever. The mission that had started with Sarah being left behind in the rain had become something much more important, a mission to build the family that fate had always intended them to have. The news of General Rodriguez and Private Chen's relationship spread through the base like wildfire, but not in the way either of them expected. Instead of whispers and gossip, there was respect and understanding. The soldiers had all heard about how the general had personally rescued Sarah from the rain, and how he had held Lieutenant Morrison accountable for abandoning a wounded comrade. They saw it as proof of the general's character, not as favoritism or scandal. Sarah returned to light duty after a week of recovery, but everything was different now. She no longer felt like she was alone in the world. Having a father changed how she saw herself and her place in the military. She walked taller, spoke with more confidence, and approached her duties with renewed purpose. "I want to transfer to a different unit," she told General Rodriguez during one of their daily meetings. They had agreed to meet every evening to continue learning about each other and building their relationship. "Why?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "Are people treating you differently because of our connection?" "No, sir. Actually, everyone has been very respectful." Sarah sat across from him in his office, her posture straight and professional. "I want to transfer because I need to prove that I can succeed on my own merits, not because I'm the general's daughter." General Rodriguez felt a surge of pride. This was exactly the kind of integrity and independence that Maria had possessed. "You don't have anything to prove, Sarah. Everyone on this base knows you're an exceptional soldier." "Maybe so, but I need to know it for myself." Sarah's voice was firm but respectful. "I've spent my whole life wondering if I was good enough, if I could measure up to the standards my mother set for me. Now I have a chance to find out who I really am as a soldier, without any outside influence." "Where would you want to transfer?" "Special operations. I want to train for the kind of missions where lives depend on every team member being absolutely reliable." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "I want to be the kind of soldier who never leaves anyone behind, no matter what." General Rodriguez understood immediately. Sarah wasn't just choosing a career path. She was choosing to honor the lesson she had learned from being abandoned in the rain. She wanted to become the kind of leader who would always come back for the wounded, the lost, the forgotten. "Special operations training is extremely difficult," he warned. "The failure rate is over 60%. It will test every limit you have, physical and mental." "I know, sir. But I also know that I'm stronger than I used to think. Having a father who believes in me changes everything." Sarah smiled. "Besides, I have good genes, right?" General Rodriguez laughed, the first truly joyful laugh he had experienced in years. "Yes, you definitely have good genes. From both sides of your family." That evening, they drove together to the small cemetery where Maria Chen was buried. It was the first time General Rodriguez had visited her grave, though Sarah came here every year on the anniversary of Maria's death. The headstone was simple, but elegant. "Maria Chen, beloved mother. She taught others to find their way home. I used to come here and tell her about everything that was happening in my life," Sarah said as they stood together in front of the grave. "I would ask her for advice, and imagine what she would say." General Rodriguez placed a small bouquet of wildflowers on the grave. "What do you think she would say about all this? About us finding each other?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "I think she would say that love always finds a way, that the people who are meant to be in our lives will always come back to us, even if it takes 23 years. She touched the phoenix tattoo on her arm. "She used to say that phoenixes don't just rise from their own ashes. Sometimes they rise from the ashes of other phoenixes who came before them." She sounds like she was very wise. She was. "And I think she would be happy that you found me. She always said that the best gifts in life are the ones we never see coming." Sarah knelt down and placed her hand on the headstone. "Thank you, Mom, for everything you sacrificed, for the strength you gave me, for loving Dad enough to protect his future, even at the cost of your own happiness." General Rodriguez knelt beside his daughter. "Maria, I hope you can forgive me for not finding you sooner. I hope you know that not a day went by that I didn't think about you, and I promise you that I'll spend the rest of my life making sure Sarah knows how loved she is." They stayed at the cemetery until sunset, sharing stories about Maria and talking about their plans for the future. General Rodriguez told Sarah about his decision to retire from the military within the next year so that he could focus on being a father. Sarah told him about her dreams of one day starting a foundation to help military families in crisis. "You don't have to retire because of me," Sarah said as they walked back to their car. "I don't want you to give up everything you've worked for." "I'm not giving up anything," he replied. "I'm finally getting the thing I always wanted most. A family. Besides, 30 years of military service is enough for anyone. It's time for me to start a new chapter." "What will you do?" "I've been offered a position training new officers at the military academy. It would allow me to stay involved in the military while having a more normal schedule." General Rodriguez opened the car door for her. "Plus, it's only 2 hours away from wherever you end up stationed. I could visit on weekends." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes again. She was still getting used to having someone who wanted to be a permanent part of her life. I'd like that. I'd really like that. 6 months later, Sarah graduated from special operations training with the highest scores in her class. General Rodriguez was there for the ceremony, wearing civilian clothes instead of his uniform. He had officially retired the week before, ending a distinguished career that had spanned 3 decades. As Sarah received her new assignment and insignia, General Rodriguez felt a deep sense of completion. The young woman standing on that stage was everything Maria had dreamed their child could become. Strong, compassionate, dedicated to serving others. She had inherited the best qualities from both of her parents and forged them into something uniquely her own. After the ceremony, Sarah found her father in the crowd. "So, what do you think, Dad?" It still felt strange to say that word, but also wonderfully right. "I think your mother would be incredibly proud," he said, pulling her into a hug. "I think she's watching us right now and smiling." "I hope so. I have something for you." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped box. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." General Rodriguez opened the box to find a silver watch with an engraving on the back. "To the father who found me in the rain. Time can't heal all wounds, but love can bridge any distance. Your daughter, Sarah." "Sarah, this is..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The watch was beautiful, but the message meant everything to him. "I know we lost 23 years together, but I don't want to waste any more time," Sarah said. "From now on, every minute counts." General Rodriguez put on the watch immediately. "Every minute counts," he agreed. 1 year later, Sarah was leading her own special operations team on a rescue mission in hostile territory. When they found 3 wounded soldiers who had been left behind by their unit, Sarah made sure every single one of them was carried to safety, no matter how dangerous or difficult it became. "Why did you risk the mission for 3 wounded soldiers?" her commanding officer asked during the debriefing. "Because someone once taught me that we never leave anyone behind," Sarah replied. "No matter what the cost, no matter how difficult it becomes, we bring everyone home." That same week, General Rodriguez was teaching a leadership class to new military officers. One of the cadets asked him about the most important lesson he had learned during his career. "The most important lesson I learned is that sometimes the greatest victories happen when you least expect them," he said, thinking about that rainy night when he had found his daughter. "Sometimes what looks like the end of a mission is actually the beginning of something much more important." "What do you mean, sir?" "I mean that real success isn't measured by the objectives you complete or the promotions you receive. Real success is measured by the lives you touch and the people you help find their way home." General Rodriguez looked out the window at the training grounds where young soldiers were preparing for their futures. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, helping someone else find their way home helps you find your own way too. Every Sunday, Sarah and her father met at Maria's grave to share the events of the week and ask for her guidance on difficult decisions. They brought flowers, told her about their successes and challenges, and thanked her for the sacrifices she had made to bring them together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had found her back then?" Sarah asked one Sunday as they sat on the grass beside the headstone. "I used to wonder about that all the time," General Rodriguez replied. "But now I think everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. If I had found her then, I might not have been the father you needed. I was too focused on my career, too ambitious, too young to understand what really mattered. And if you had found me earlier, I might not have developed the strength I needed to become the soldier I am today." Sarah picked up a fallen leaf and traced its edges with her finger. "Mom always said that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most beautiful destinations." She was right about that. She was right about a lot of things. General Rodriguez stood and helped Sarah to her feet. "Ready to go home?" "Yes, Dad, let's go home." As they walked away from the cemetery together, both father and daughter knew that they had finally found what they had been searching for their entire lives. Not just each other, but the understanding that family isn't always about the time you have together. Sometimes it's about the love that survives the time apart. The phoenix tattoo on Sarah's arm had indeed represented rising from the ashes, but it had also represented something else, the idea that some flames never truly die. The love between Marcus and Maria had survived 23 years of separation. Their daughter had carried that love forward, becoming a bridge between the past they had lost and the future they could build together. And in the end, the mission that had started with Sarah being left alone in the rain had become the most successful mission of both their lives. They had rescued each other from the loneliness and regret that had defined them for so long. They had proven that it's never too late for second chances, and that sometimes the people we're meant to find are worth waiting a lifetime to discover. Years later, when Sarah had children of her own, she would tell them about the night their grandfather found her in the rain. She would tell them about a mother brave enough to sacrifice her own happiness for love, and a father determined enough to never let anyone be left behind again. And she would teach them that sometimes the greatest missions are the ones that bring families home to each other, no matter how long the journey takes.